Hey there fellow creators, Ben here from Cinder Studios, and this week I'm starting a brand new series documenting exactly how I create a painting. Stick around. So over the years I've had a number of questions from a number of people, both online and in real life, of what my process actually looks like. How do I get an idea? How do I come up with all of these strange worlds and everything like that to paint? Well, a lot of it starts in my sketchbook, but some of it doesn't. And I thought it would be a really high time, really, to start exploring and showing my process and what that really looks like from start to finish, and giving you some tips along the way. So this is going to be a 4-part video series where I take you on sort of the major, I guess you could say, story beats of how it takes me to create a piece. Now, I do want to put in one major disclaimer at the beginning here. This whole process is me showing just that, this process. This is not a painting, by the time I'm finished with it, whatever the idea happens to be, that I want you guys to copy. You're not allowed to do that. This is not do this painting because I'm showing you how to make it. This is very much, here's how I do it, but please don't copy my work, because, you know, plagiarism and art theft and all that. Okay, that said, let's go ahead and kind of get started here. So this is going to be a little bit different than a lot of my regular video series. It's probably going to be closer in tone to a lot of my vlogs, but I do still want to give you guys some good top-down shots of what I'm working on and everything like that. So everything I do from start to finish, not everything, but most things, start in my sketchbook. Now, for a long time I was doing on a really regular daily sketch routine. I've been out of that for a while, but when I do get around to sitting down and sketching again, I'm just plugging out page after page after page after page because I'm really just cranking those ideas out and really trying to find ways to just build new ideas. Recently on a post from some art company I follow on socials, it was like, so how do you treat your sketchbook? I'm like, well, for me it's a project book. It's a way to get ideas, and because I'm not necessarily needing to get as many ideas because I have a huge backlog of other sketchbooks to pull ideas from, my daily sketches have fallen a little bit by the wayside. Working on trying to get back into that though. That said, I'm going to go ahead and crack this open, and we're going to start having a look at just building basically an idea up from nothing. Okay, so welcome to my sketchbook. I use pretty much exclusively these Canson sketch pads with the spiral. These are 5x7. I wear cargo pants every day, so this sketchbook perfectly fits in one of my side pockets, so I can always carry my sketchbook with me fairly conveniently. Because of the spiral bound, some people like book bound stuff. I like the spiral bound because I can keep this pen in here. So whether or not I'm carrying my extra 3 pens, which I usually am, I can always just have one to sketch with if I need to. So this is a Uniball Vision Elite. I jump around between the different Uniball pens, but 1 or 2 of them is usually in my studio somewhere. I have other pens, but honestly I find that these regular ones, it's like even if I can't make it to the art store, I can just find these in an office supply store nice and easily, so it's mostly why I end up using them. My other 3 pens are, well, it's very worn out at this point because I handle it so much all that text is gone, but this is a Graphic 3 from the Pigma Micron. There's a nice chisel tip to it. I don't exclusively use the Microns for the chisel tips, but I do really like theirs, so I tend to use that. I added a white pen into my set a while back. I jumped around between a few different brands, but at this point now I've actually settled on the Faber-Castell Pitt pens, because they use I think they use a pigment ink or something. It's a little different than a lot of the, oh no, it is actually India ink, look at that. And it ends up being a little bit more transparent when it goes onto the page than something like the white Uniball pens, which I started out with. But I feel like these last a little bit longer and do a little bit more of what I want them to do. And the last on the list is a staple for many artists, sort of, and that is the Pentel Pocket Brush Pen. Almost forgot what it was called. Although instead of the black ink that it comes with, I empty my cartridges out. Well, no, I don't just empty them out, but you know, I use them up in one of the other. I have like 4 of these pens, and I fill mine with some brown walnut ink. Well, all walnut ink is brown, but the walnut ink is really fascinating because I can mix with the other inks, usually on the side here, and I'll show you some of that later, as well as just be able to kind of reactivate it because walnut ink is water soluble. Now that said, I usually start things out with a page of these mini thumbnails. If you've seen my second channel, you've seen a lot of my sketchbooks before, and you would have seen a page of like these before. So I'll box these out, and then I'll do two different layers. I'll come in with the brown ink, and then I will come in with usually the chisel tip pen to block out some other shapes and just do some really simple, usually low detail stuff. So for this page, I already have half the boxes done, so I'm just going to go in and throw a few more in. And I never like line up box to box. I kind of treat it like bricks. So they're kind of stacked and layered a little bit. So at least visually, they look a little nicer, especially when somebody else is flipping through my sketchbook. Okay, that's the wrong pen. This is a pretty simple method here. I'm using mostly my elbow and shoulder to create these lines, keeping my wrist and fingers steady. At least as steady as someone like me can hold them. My hands tend to shake a bit. And I'm using a method that I've actually only first heard the term probably about 2 years ago, and it was called the dot-to-dot method. This is what somebody, I think, called it. Where it's like 2 dots, and then you just connect that line with a line, you know. It's an easy way to make a straight line and do so visually without having to pull out a ruler. I actually find that a regular desk works better than my regular art table. For this is actually a lot higher, or possibly a lot lower. I don't know. It's also really early in the morning, so my lines aren't going to be as clean as they probably would be normally. I didn't forget that one on the left. I'm making that a long box. And the lines, especially the vertical lines, aren't, you know, super. When I'm not doing these little quick connections, they're not perfect, but they're thumbnails. They don't have to be. All right, I probably could have gotten another box set in here, but I think I'm going to hold off. Now, a lot of times in this lower section, if I don't put another layer of boxes in, I'm going to be coming up with a general theme or a starting off point. So I just did a big piece with a big bridge and a big castle. So, well, castle in the distance, something like that. So I want something that is radically different than that. So I'm thinking trees, forests, maybe groves, bays, and cliffs. And I'll use that as sort of as a starter. Now from here, it's really just thinking about, you know, basic perspective and shape. I've got a lot of sort of a mental catalog built up for a lot of this stuff, so I can just kind of use the shape of this brush pen to do a lot of the work for me. So if you've never used one of these pocket brush pens, essentially, whoops, what you get out of that is you get a nice, well, it's a brush stroke essentially because they're loose bristles. You can get really fine lines, you can get really thick lines. I love getting just little taps with it as well. You can do a lot with that. And at this point, it's just really, very much of it is just think about where I might want a horizon or a sun. Sometimes I'll have to drop a little sun in there somewhere like that, and just build around that. And it's not totally random lines, but it is fairly free form. I'm not thinking a ton about stuff. I'm kind of just letting go and just kind of seeing what happens in my mind with where, you know, things start kind of popping out. Now, that isn't necessarily always the case. Sometimes I have a clearer idea of what I want, especially if I'm doing more commission-y work or you know, something along those lines. But it's really a lot more just kind of play, let my hand kind of move on its own a little bit. And again, a lot of that is very much having a mental back catalog of reference images, just built up. I mean, I wasn't sketching like this 20 years ago. I was, you know, still playing with more refined ideas. One of the things I did before I started doing this was, at least doing like the mini thumbnail versions of these, was to do a bunch of studies of digital concept art pieces just in my sketchbook with regular thumbnails. And then after I did a few of those, I usually could kind of mash some of those ideas together into a more original piece. And that was really fun to do for a while. It definitely kind of led me into figuring out where I wanted shapes and things like that, so I can do this more free-form method of these thumbnails. I'm going to go ahead and throw the rest of this in the time lapse, throw some music on, and explore some of these ideas in the meantime. And I will be back. Okay, now that I got the initial brown layer in, I'm going to come back in with that chisel tip the way I talked before. Now this is, I mean, it varies depending on what I want to do, but usually a lot more sparing than the other layer. I don't want to completely black anything out unless I really don't like something. So at this point it's just about maybe making a few choice ideas of anything that's a little more plain. There's a couple in here that I didn't do as much with in terms of like the midground and background. I can come in with the black and then create a more defined subject for the piece, at least as much as a subject you can make with a big blob. So, same as before, I'm just going to kind of start playing a little bit. In this case, I'm focusing a little bit more on the positive and negative space than I was before. But generally speaking, things are still pretty loose. Okay, so whole page of these little mini thumbnails. Again, these are super fun to do. They take, the whole page of these took me about a half hour. So nothing too crazy, good way to sit down and practice real quick. So from here, I will take, again, like this one. So this is just a little bit longer, so I kind of like that size. And we'll just make a nice bigger one. And kind of define some of those shapes out a little bit more. And to start out, I'll just kind of go back and forth and mostly kind of trace that silhouette. Not trace it, but get the general idea of where all of those shapes were. Basic perspective lines, stuff like that. And keeping things really loose here. Again, mostly elbow and shoulder work for the bulk of this, at least to start. Something like that, maybe. Make a few decisions about where I want some of those shapes. And now that I'm playing with this a little bit more, I'm thinking maybe not so much a specific sky element, maybe even the background is sort of an otherworldly gap in here, like this, where only the light's coming in through the center of this. So actually, for this, normally I would start pulling some browns in there, but I think the idea of kind of making this a solid piece back here. Now it's starting to bleed a little bit here. This is what I mean with the walnut ink and being able to get gradients and stuff. So where are we coming in here? This way. Kind of fades out. Like that. Now from here, I actually want to do a little bit more of a gradient. So normally I just kind of scoot the sketchbook to the side and put a little bit down with this pen. This is the regular Uniball pen, and I'll pick that ink up so I can get the gray, or the darker brown. I keep calling it gray, but similar to that. Obviously, if I'm working more on the go, or if I have this kind of propped up somewhere, I'll probably just keep this pen in there like that and just have one of these out of my pocket at a time. But yeah, it's an interesting start. That way then the light kind of come out like this in that pattern, so then the rest of this will also kind of be dark subsequently. The foreground will be probably really dark, but we'll get to that later. Well, maybe not. Still kind of have a pattern. Still darker there, here. Okay. So now I just kind of render this out a little bit, just grabbing that, that Uniball.
Please stop saying Uniball.
No, I will not.
And just start finding my darks and just hatching and cross-hatching and wiggling and things like that. I'm not looking for detail so much as I'm looking for, you might call it the illusion of detail, sort of the idea of where those shapes would be, whether they're trees or rocks or what have you. I'm just establishing land and figuring those shapes out. Kind of has a little bit of a Maze Runner vibe to it, I've seen clips of that movie, though. I've never actually seen it. Something right in that path would be dark and have a long shadow. The idea of this thing on the right being a little bit more organic. More bulbous, even a pod of some kind, maybe. Work with that ink on the page and darken that. It's going to be more in the shadow anyhow. definitely want to keep this darker. That's better. Get my figures in here somewhere. That's not bad. Still might tweak things a little bit, but at least especially up towards the... for me, the composition can be tweaked anytime up until and even through the actual painting process itself. But really just kind of getting that basic idea there is really kind of all I'm looking for. So again, there's not a lot of detail in this. It's a lot about just blocking out values and shapes. So it kind of gives you the idea of where things are, but without having to sit there and like, okay, I have to put that detail there or this detail there. And one thing I do as a preference is when I find one I like and know that I really like it, I know it's going to be at least a decent sketch, whether or not it'll be a piece or not, is I will put this black border around it, and this is why I get the chisel tip pen. This gives me the idea of the actual canvas edge. And usually, a lot of times, as I'm working, I'm also coming up with a title. This is where I come up with titles for all my pieces. Happen almost always in the sketchbook, believe it or not. So, yeah, I like playing off of the Maze Runner idea a little bit more. I actually want to, because we're kind of coming this way with perspective, I might turn this kind of into a wall. Make that a three-dimensional shape and have light coming out of it, you know? Kind of like that idea. Anyway, actually, probably should go in the other way with whatever. I'll mess with it later. Something like, or like the labyrinths from Zelda Breath of the Wild or something like that. Like that's kind of what I'm thinking about with getting the big barrier here. Beyond something like. Breach the Labyrinth. That seems all right. Again, titles can change a lot. Not always, but quite often. Okay, so I'll make some notes here for myself in case a lot of times if I'm not painting it right away, which I almost never am. I'm usually 2 or 3 years behind in whatever I'm sketching. Or painting, rather. Like I'll sketch something and like 3 years later I'll get around to painting it. And if I really like it, and in this case, I'm probably going to go ahead and use this one for this series, so I'll put a little star by it for, you know, this is one I like, this is one we should paint. And so, large wall, stone, with break, light coming through. Organic structure on the right. Heavy contrast with lighting. Okay, now a lot of times I'll get 2 to a page, 2, 3 to a page, but a lot of my notes are kind of going a little far here, so I might put another one here, but that's a sketch for another day. So it looks like this is probably going to be our composition. Now, one thing I will do occasionally, I used to do it all the time. I don't necessarily have time to do it all the time now, but I am going to show you guys in this video what that process looks like, and that is the color sketch phase, or the digital sketch phase. It adds basically another hour to this whole process. It's not 100% necessary, but it gives me an idea of where, and start establishing what I want to think about with color. Now, some thumbnails, if we look back through the sketchbook a little bit, I will have color notes, sometimes. I don't know if any of these do. Like this one in particular, I specifically say red-orange sky reflecting the ocean. So that is a more distinct color note, so for that, I would not need to do a color sketch because I already had a color idea for it. This one I have no color ideas for. No idea what it's going to look like when I hit the paint. So it's a good example of something that I need a digital sketch for, or just a color sketch for. I mean, I could use anything, pastels, colored pencils, a lot more mini thumbnails like this with other media. But I find digital is a lot more forgiving. So I'm going to take this up to my office, and we'll go from there. Okay, so real fast, I got this sketch scanned on in, and I did I made it a little less opaque. Came in over top with just a quick sort of resketching over top of my lines, and now I can just start thinking a little bit about color. So again, I'm not going to do a ton here, really just trying to block out a general idea. I'm going to start with, I guess, sort of a neutral gray-ish, maybe a little bit warmer even, for those walls. Where's that guy? You there. Might be a little bit of lag happening. I'm not entirely sure because I've got tablet going at the same time as screen recording. Oh, I'm still on that layer, aren't I? Well, that would make a difference, wouldn't it? Want to grab a new layer or something other than the sketch layer? And build that color up behind that. Okay, that's a start. There, I'll go a little bit lighter because I wanted that, where we got color. That center section. I was kind of offsetting and making that another lighter area. Maybe even lighter than behind that. Kind of like the pinks that I've kind of already got going on, so I may stick with that. I can always adjust it as I go, Make that really bright, and then subsequently darker here. Oh, what was that line? I do not know. What is this? Hold on, what did I hit? Where's this weird line? What did I move? Guide. No, I don't need the guide. Jeez. Alright. Haven't painted in Photoshop in a while. Probably make it a little lighter towards that back end, but that's about it. Yeah. Darker. Again, similar to the other sketch, I'm really just blocking out color and shape here. I think the organicness of that shape on the right doesn't necessarily need to be there. Can keep that a little more of just like a big boulder, I think. I think compositionally it just doesn't feel quite right. So that's why we keep sketching, that's why we keep working on it, to hammer out those details before we take that to canvas and make those mistakes on canvas and then have to paint over things. It's gray. It's kind of like using a marker, this flat hard brush. Just maps that out. All right, grab dark here. Stick with that roughly the same line work and color there. All right, that's a decent base. I do want to fiddle around a little bit with more of this. It's actually darker than it, or lighter, whatever. Play with that. Here, there. Again, just to kind of give myself a general idea of where stuff's at. Sometimes I do go in a little bit more of a depth in terms of the concept sketch, but I kind of want to keep things simple here. I think I'm going to amp up the reds a bit. Kick that saturation into high gear. Maybe make it a little bit pinker. That looks pretty good. Now that I'm seeing a lot more of these red tones on the sides of those walls, I'm going to probably should have put that mid-ground on a different layer, but that's all right. Swap that. Grab this color and then just make it oranger. And just pull some of that up in here. For a little more complex color. Yeah, I think this sort of burnt orangey red for this area. Probably going to be the best bet, sort of like a red sandstone maybe. Yeah, and this center pink for sure is, I think definitely where I want my light to be. I really like this sort of color thing going on with the pinks and the oranges. I think that's gonna look nice. A little lighter over there. Maybe even it's so bright that it's creating glare. Like that way. Whoa, hello. Crap. Now my color changed. So you get a little bit more coming in there like that. All right. And then I'll just get a hard round. Oh, hard, round, small. And just do some details and extra little highlights, but actually we'll say the sketch can come off at this point. Whoa, hello. Need to put those back on. I'm going to kind of re-sketch in some other stuff here to see what and where those shapes are. Rather sparingly, though. And the same with a dark, possibly a deep blue. And all of these, like the rock shapes and everything, I'll find more of those out when I'm doing the actual painting. But again, just kind of keeping things, I don't know, relatively there. I mean, a lot of those, the shapes will, again, they'll change a bit in the painting itself. But this is just, again, to get myself a vague idea of where things are. I don't know why I'm doing it that way. I can do it with my little wheel. Figures. Yeah, it feels pretty good. I imagine when I paint it, it'll be a little more saturated than it is, but I feel like that's pretty good. I think that's enough to give me exactly what I need going onto canvas. So I think that should be good for that. So that is really all, not the only thing I do with the digital sketch phase. There are times, again, that I will put a little bit more detail into this, but I don't feel I really need it for this piece. This was just about thinking about color a little bit. And the good thing about this, again, is like, depending on what I want to do with color, having the Photoshop file, is I can go in and, you know, oh, wait a minute, I gotta do that on the right layer, though. Actually, hang on a second, I can then adjust that hue and literally make it any color I want, if I so desire. But I really think that the red tones that I had to start are probably the way to go. And just cycling through that. I can't say, well, maybe a little bit of that yellow-green's pretty neat, but yeah, right kind of where I have it with these pink tones and some burnt oranges and stuff. I think this is where this composition's going to kind of live. And again, things might change. I might decide to put some grass or something in here. All of that can change. But in terms of the major points of this piece being main composition and color, I think I've got it pretty much down now. So that is just a look at my sketch process. I know this probably seems like a fairly long process here, but building up these ideas really starts here. If the idea isn't good here, then I won't ever take it to canvas. So for more in this series, check out the playlist in the description box below, as well as just when these videos start to come out. For the next part of this, I'm going to check my list, because I did make note of what I was doing. Okay, so next time we're not actually going straight into canvas, because again, there's a lot of prep in art. So doing a lot of this stuff before you even take brush to canvas is also really important. So next time we're going to be talking about canvas prep, picking the right canvas, playing with different gessos, stuff like that. All of that factors into the right up until we get to the point where we can actually paint. So there's a lot more to it than just, oh, I have an idea, let me paint it. So if you guys are enjoying this series, or have enjoyed the series so far, hit the like button, let me know your thoughts and comments below. If you'd like to see more process videos like this, well, one, they are coming, but let me know what part of the process is still kind of a mystery to you guys, and which things feel a little bit, I don't know, like I don't know how to get beyond this barrier, I don't know how to solve this problem, or has this first part of this really kind of demystified that for you? Whatever your thoughts regarding this topic, let me know in comments below. Get subscribed if you're not already. I just realized I'm not staying in front of the wall where I normally stand. Like, comment, subscribe. Socials in description box, as well as the community Discord, where you can share your process and get feedback on it as well. Keep on creating. This has been from Cinder Studios, and I will see you guys next time.